You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the Interactive Interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com.
Hey everybody, this is Ricky Steamboat, and you are listening to the Interactive Interview.
Hello everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Interactive Interview on the InteractiveInterview.com. We're joined by Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Rick, how you doing?
Hey, good morning guys. It's Tuesday morning over here in Mooresville, North Carolina, calling you from my boat shop here in Mooresville.
Well, that kind of leads into our first question. What have you been doing since you left the mainstream area of professional wrestling?
94 is when I retired.
Right.
In 95-ish, I opened up a health club up here on Lake Norman. Had that up until 2001 and sold it. During the late 90s, my son got involved with some car racing, and he still is, and worked at a race shop for a couple of years, and then a friend of mine and myself, about 8 months ago, decided to open up our own shop and get more into working on boats. We do work on cars, but mostly trying to work on boats here on Lake Norman up here in Mooresville.
Wow.
And that brings me to current what I'm doing now. We have our own shop here and just doing pretty good here working on boats.
Well, that's great to hear. We usually go in like a date order, so we're going to go way back to the beginning. And what attracted you to professional wrestling?
Well, I grew up in Florida, in St. Petersburg, and on Saturdays, on occasion, with my friends in high school and stuff, we used to watch Florida Championship Wrestling with Gordon Soley.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't until around 1974 that through a contact, I ventured up to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and went through Vern Gagne's training school. That was in 74.
Right.
And actually what got me interested, I wrestled in high school and was pretty good as an amateur wrestler. Watched the entertainment pro wrestling on TV with Florida Championship Wrestling. I thought it was entertaining, and just said, well, maybe I can do that. And so through a contact, actually a girlfriend of mine who went to Minneapolis to become a flight attendant for Northwest Orient, and her roommate was Donna Gagne, which was Vern's daughter at the time, and just through some exchanges of phone numbers, I got a starting date and ventured from Florida up to Minneapolis to go through the camp.
Is she the one that married Larry Zbyszko?
No.
No,
Donna?
Yeah.
No, I think that one might have been Kathy, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think Donna's ever married. No.
Now, we normally do word associations towards the end of the show, but there are just two names I'd quickly like to get your opinion on right now. The first is Dino Bravo.
Dino Bravo. Wow. Was an okay guy. I remembered him in the late 70s and early 80s when he wrestled here in the for Crockett Promotions for Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
Was a pretty good worker. But on and off for a couple years, even though he was a babyface here and I was a face, we didn't travel that much together. But okay guy in the locker room, and a pretty hard worker in the ring.
And the second one's Jay Youngblood.
Jay Youngblood, the best tag team partner I've ever had.
Wow.
For a guy that probably stood 5'9", 5'10", and weighed 195 pounds, knew how to work, had a lot of fire as a babyface for his comebacks, and also knew how to sell his butt off when it was time for the heels to get heat. And excellent. We gelled real well as a tag team, the best tag team partner I ever had.
Were you surprised to hear that he passed away?
Yeah, well, I would say we were together for almost 5 years, and the last year that we were together, he was getting mixed up on the wrong things to do, and was getting to the point where it would show in his work in our matches. I was really surprised when he passed at such an early age. I think he was like 29.
Yeah. On Christmas of 1983, they announced that you were leaving the business or retiring. What led to this decision, and was there an angle involved, or were you literally going to be done with the business?
Actually, it was, I would say, pretty much an angle involved to where they wanted to, Crockett Promotions at the time wanted to make it like a retirement for me, but at the time I was just opening up my first gym in Charlotte and just felt that I just needed to be there since I had my name up front, and just was actually just going to take a break away from the business for about 6 months. But they wanted to make it more like a retirement thing to make I guess a bigger deal out of it.
And then you resurfaced in 1985 in the WWF.
Yeah.
So what brought you back?
Well, after opening up the gym and taking some time off, came back to Crockett Promotions. Dusty Rhodes at the time was working in the office as the booker. Him also being a babyface, but he was the guy. He was the guy with the pencil.
Right.
I could see the direction how he was using me, pretty much as a stepping stone. So, using me to work with some of the top heels and put them over, and then he would come in behind me and beat them in 5 minutes. George Scott, at the time, was working for Vince McMahon as the booker up there.
Right.
Gave me a lot of success when he worked for Crockett here. He was actually he was the booker and instrumented the matches between Flair and myself as I was getting started in the main event caliber.
Right.
When he went to Vince, I got a phone call from him, and it wasn't too long afterwards. At early '85, I started working for the WWF, and that was because of George Scott.
What did you think of the direction the WWF was taking by going on MTV and the supercards like WrestleMania?
Well, let me go back to the mid '80s when I started working for Vince and understanding that he wanted to take the business to another level,
right?
And doing what he was doing with production and his TVs, and of course, the first WrestleManias on through, how business just went like wildfire. Sellouts everywhere we went. Credible people were actually watching the show, movie stars and people that were higher up that normally you would not think that was your typical wrestling fan, but became a wrestling fan because of the production level that Vince brought to the table. And then through the 80s and then 90s, and understanding where, I guess, to hold the audience, he's continually trying to take the business to different levels to see what works and what doesn't work. So, there's some things I don't agree with, and there's, but I also understand that here's a man with that is trying to keep the audience and keeping the business to where he generates new viewing people all the time.
Absolutely.
And one of our former guests on the show, who, when he came on, spoke very highly of you, Jake the Snake Roberts, he injured you with a DDT. Now, can you tell us what was the extent of the injuries that you received from that move?
Never went to the hospital, but I suspected that, and it was planned for, to where he was going to. They had these mats around the ring on the floor, and he moved the mats away, and that was designed to give me a DDT on the cement floor, and then have them carry me out in the stretcher to start an angle between the two of us.
Right.
Actually, I did take the DDT at a full blow. My forehead swelled up tremendously, and it was kind of scary looking there for a while, but it was strictly by design, and I tried to make it look as help him along with the DDT as best as possible, because of the fact we had some handheld cameras down there on the floor level, and everything was in real tight, and just wanted to make it good, and we just did a DDT just a tick too close, and it just gave me I suspect, a slight concussion, although I did not lose consciousness, but my forehead swelled up. Oh my goodness, like I had a softball sticking out of the side of in the front of my forehead. It looked like Neanderthal man.
What is your opinion of Jake?
Excellent worker, great psychologist in the ring. At that time, for a guy that was How tall is Jake? 6'4", 6'5"?
Yeah, he's a pretty big guy.
Tall guy, but wasn't built.
Right. He had the rock and roll build.
More built like a basketball player.
Right.
But his workability in the ring was so convincing that it didn't matter who he was working with. Could be very, very convincing in the ring. You know, his punches were great. The way he would register and sell was great. Always a joy to work with him in the ring whenever him and I, you know, hooked up together to work.
Here's a question I'm sure you get asked 1,000 times. WrestleMania 3, your match with Randy Savage.
Yeah.
What are your memories?
You know, we got a lot of PR on that match, and it was probably because of the fact that Hogan and Andre was the two main event guys that sold the show, both live at the Silverdome with 90-some thousand plus people there, and also the pay-per-view buy rate, which was very high.
Absolutely.
And that's how we got a lot of press. Savage and I knew this going in, that this was going to be a big show because they were billing Hogan and the Giant. So we just wanted to take advantage of it and put together a match that we actually had the idea that we're going to, you know, they drew the show, but we're going to steal it.
Right.
We ended up stealing the show and got the best match out of that show.
And now's probably a good time to ask this one. Could you compare for us your classic matches with Ric Flair to your classic matches with Randy Savage, and which would you say held more value in your career overall?
Well, you know, I would have to say with Flair, I worked more with Flair, but by design, in most cases, Flair and I would go into the match only knowing the finish, and most of the match would be called in the ring, feeling out the people and using that type of psychology, which I thought was more professional. Randy was the type of guy that liked to have the whole match completely designed out, you know, from start to finish. And sometimes when you do that, things that you are doing in the ring may not work, and it's very hard to change midstream,
right?
Especially with everything being thought of beforehand. If Flair and I were working the arm or the leg or whatever part of the body and the people weren't buying it, we would move on to something else until we found something that they did buy, and then go on with the match. And that's typically why we had so many classic matches that, you know, went 45, 50, 55, and 60 minutes.
Right.
We just got pure joy out of working with each other in the ring, and that was another reason why our matches always went so long. The people buying a ticket knew that if we were headlining the show, that they were going to get their money's worth on a hell of a match. So, you know, we never went out there with the idea that we're just going to go 15 or 20 minutes. We knew that we were in for the long run, but it wasn't anything that was begrudging. It was always something that was inspiring.
Do you feel that's a lost art, being able to call it in the ring instead of calling it in the back?
I don't mind having a couple of, you know, good spots, and always having the attitude that if the match dictates the spots, you know, to use them, just don't use them for the sake of using a spot.
Right.
But if the match dictates, and if that's the picture that we're painting in front of the crowd, if that's the direction that we're going, and the spot does come up fine, it's always good to have a couple in your hip pocket.
Right.
But most of a true professional, you go out there and just try to feel the fans out and pick a direction, and if they're buying it, you know, then you really, really go with the flow. That is the way I've always liked to do things.
It was very short after your Intercontinental title win that they gave the belt to the Honky Tonk Man, and you seemed to disappear off the screen. What happened, and why was your run with the title so short?
Well, when Vince told me that I was going to get the Intercontinental title,
right,
and he said that I was probably going to have it for about a year to establish me as the Intercontinental Champion, I was very pleased, but also at the same time, I was going to have a son,
right,
that was going to be born in July, and he was born on July the 7th.
Right. So
I was right up front with Vince and asking him, I would like to have 2 weeks off in July. This was before I got the belt at WrestleMania.
Right.
2 weeks off, so that I could be there when my son was born.
Right.
And there was no problem with that. I didn't have it too long afterwards, and maybe, I don't know, 10 weeks or so like that he just came up to me on the TV and said that he had a change of plans, and that he wanted me to drop the belt to Honky Tonk Wayne Ferris at that TV. I said fine, and then after I dropped the belt to Wayne, I said, do you remember when in July I was asking to have 2 weeks off?
Right.
He said yes. I said, well, I'm going to take 6 months off, and that's why I sort of disappeared for 6 months.
Wow.
I mean, it was kind of a shock to me because his reason was that they didn't want to leave the belt, the Intercontinental belt, dormant during those 2 weeks. And I thought 2 weeks out of a year was nothing. And thinking back the kind of schedule that we were wrestling at, sometimes we would be in Philly and you wouldn't be back there for a month.
Right.
Or Madison Square Garden or L.A. or whatever. You wouldn't be back for maybe a month or 2 months.
Right.
So I just thought 2 weeks was just a short period of time, maybe almost asking like to have a weekend.
Right.
And then when he came up with the idea he didn't want to leave the belt dormant, I had heard that when Wayne Ferris, Honky Tonk, came aboard, that Vince was very instrumental in designing the costumes and giving him his ring intro song, and was going to try and push him real hard. So I guess just using me as an example at that time was part of his Vince's thought process.
Were you surprised that it didn't have you return the favor to Savage at WrestleMania 4?
I was very surprised because that is after I had taken 6 months off and I was coming back.
Right.
And we knew going in that Savage was going to be win the belt on that. It was like a tournament.
Uh-huh. Right.
And I saw on the brackets that I was going to have Savage in the second round, and I was going to have Greg in the first round.
Right.
And I thought, well, looking at it, I'll probably go over Greg and then return the favor back to Savage and put him over because of the fact that we had that classic match the year before.
Right.
That name never came about. I guess it was just Vince again was trying to use me as an example, and Valentine went over me, and that match never came about. Although I thought for the business, for the company, that people would have been sitting on the edge of their seat to see what kind of match Savage and I would have had, considering the big match we had the year before.
I absolutely agree. Is that
Would you say that was part of the reason that maybe you went back to the NWA?
Yeah, that was probably when, in the 80s, about 88.
Right.
Yeah, and I worked there through the year of 88, and then left Vince and did a surprise showing up with I guess Dustin Rhodes in Savannah, Georgia, as his mystery tag team partner, and went to work for WCW. And then in '89 got the belt from Flair.
Right. You also you returned to the WWF in '91 with that crazy dragon character with the tail and the breathing of fire. Did you think that was Vince somehow holding a grudge on you or anything like that?
Well, you know, at the time, he flew me up. We talked. He said, "We're going to use you as main event. Going to try and bring new life into Ricky the Dragon Steamboat." He had hired a person to do costume designing, as like a lot of the guys were getting that, with different costume designs, and with Coco Beware and all that.
Right.
At the time, no. I had thought that they were giving me a big push and flew me down to Florida to a guy by the name of Brian LaPalme, who had worked in the circus as a fire breather, and spent a couple days with him to teach me how to do it, and thought it would be a big hit on the show, especially the TVs and the pay-per-views to blow fire in the ring and come in as the dragon, And then it went on for about 10 months, and pretty much I was working, opening match and first match, second match, third match on the card, periodically asking Vince when the main event slot was going to come up, and always putting me off until maybe the next TV. And after 10 months of just working underneath, I just called him up one day and gave my notice.
Yes, and
and it's very coincidental at that time of the conversation. He happened to say that. Well, we were planning to do something with you and the Honky Tonk. You and the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, on the next TV. And I said, well, I've made my mind up. I said, I've been working underneath for you for 10 months, getting underneath pay, and I said, my workability, I think, is pretty well established, and being a world champion and this and that. It's just too late.
When you
after that, I went back to the WCW.
Right, and then you teamed up with Dustin Rhodes, and then eventually Shane Douglas, who was a former guest on our show, who spoke absolutely glowing terms of you. What is your memories of working, or teaming, I should say, with Shane Douglas?
Shane was, he was a guy that really wanted to know, wanted to learn.
Right.
And riding to towns and back from towns, we would talk about the matches, and very, very teachable guy, and was just one of those enthusiastic guys that knew that here he had a little bit of a break with WCW, tag teaming with me, and we were the champions, had the belts, and just worked hard, very, very hard, and was also as a fun guy to be with. We became close friends, and we would work out together and have great matches in the evening, and had some great matches with the late Brian Pillman and also with Steve Austin at the time. And both those guys were very, very hard workers too.
Right. That was actually our next question, what you thought of those two guys.
We not only had a lot of fun in the ring, but we also, worked very hard. And those guys would be there no matter how long the match would go. If they were getting heat up and it was time for the comeback, and that babyface was in there with a lot of fire, whether it was me or whether it was Shane, those two guys would be there. I don't care how blowed up they'd be. They would be there taking bumps and just making us look good, and end up having just great, great matches. And I knew Austin had it in him. He was also one of those guys that was wanting to know, wanting to learn.
Right.
Tell me this, or do you think this is right? This is the right time to do this in the course of this match, and stuff like that. Do you mind if I think of something in the course of our match to tell you in the ring if we can do it? And I was always open to it.
That's right.
Both guys, it was a joy to work with those guys.
What was your take on the Dos Hombres?
Dos Hombres. Kind of cartoonish.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad it didn't last too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the cover-up that Shane was injured, wasn't it?
Right.
Right, okay. Because that's what he pretty much had said to us, but he was pretty adamant at how stupid it was. So.
Yeah. I call it cartoonish. You can also call it stupid.
What led to you retiring from wrestling? What was the injury?
I've got 2 herniated discs in my lower back, and it was a bump I was working with Austin. I took a bump off the top rope and landed on my tailbone and compressed my spine. Did a spinal compression and herniated 2 discs. And, it was pretty painful. And after going to 3 doctors and ending up at Duke University and going through some CAT scans and MRIs and telling me, you could probably get back in the ring and work, but let me tell you this, you're gonna blow out one of these discs, and then we're going to go in and we're going to cut you open, and your life's going to change. I was probably 4 or 5 months from being a 20-year guy.
Right.
And so I said, well, I had a good career, and I just elected to get out, mostly for health reasons. Right. Had a son at the time, was about, I guess at that time he was around 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
And you know how it is with us guys being on the road all the time, and you got family at home. So
absolutely.
It was even though the heart wanted to continue to work, the mind was telling me, be smart about this, because you could really screw up the rest of your life.
Right.
So
like Muhammad Ali, I guess.
Yeah, and I just didn't. And if I can't get in the ring and work the way I used to work, I want the people to remember me as I was, not like, well, you bring up Muhammad Ali, and which he should have retired.
Right.
His last couple of fights, he was getting beaten up pretty well.
Right.
And I didn't want the fans to remember me as, well, Ricky should have retired, because I know in my matches I would be holding back, thinking about my back and not being able to perform like the way I wanted to. So I just sort of bowed out and disappeared for a while.
Right.
What are your thoughts on like Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels and such, coming back from major injuries after surgery?
Well, and speaking for them, it's probably a blessing. You know, I was trying to avoid surgery, so.
Right.
But then again, I know who are some of the guys that have neck surgeries. Arn Anderson.
Right.
Malenko. That had surgery and could not quite work at the level that they wanted to work at.
Right.
You know, so they had to bow out. But they went through surgery first. My game was that I don't want to be cut on, especially in the back or in the neck area.
Right.
And then try to make a comeback and then screw something else up.
In your short stay with NWA TNA, you seem to be getting some heel qualities, and then all of a sudden you were off the show. Any reasons why this happened?
About turning me heel, I didn't feel that. They probably wanted me to be a little bit more stern, because I've always been a babyface throughout my career, bringing me in like a commissioner,
right,
to uphold law and order.
Right.
That didn't last too long either. They never gave me a reason why. I was getting booked and getting my flight tickets to do the pay-per-views, and the next thing you know, no more flight tickets and no more phone calls about coming back.
So there was no
maybe things were tight in their budget at the time. I don't know. Never got a reason why we're not going to be using you, Rick. Never got a reason.
You've of course you now work with Ring of Honor, and just come off of a program with CM Punk. What are your thoughts basically on CM Punk and Ring of Honor in general?
Once again, I guess I'm kind of lucky to be working with guys throughout my career that would just want to learn and want to work. And CM is that kind of a guy. Great guy to work with, and always open to suggestions. And I know I've done a few things in the ring with him, but just also trying to be very conscious of my back. Gabe, with the company, has been trying to get me to work a match, but I'm just not going to work a match because I know I can't work a match the way I used to be able to work, and I'm not going to take that chance on my back. I had one company offer me some pretty big money just to work one match, and I turned it down. And it's not a money issue. It's just that I'm just thinking of Rick and his back, and I just don't want to get cut on.
Right. You wouldn't even come back if they offered you a match with Flair?
Oh, I don't. You know, it's. I can't make that call now because I haven't been approached.
Right.
The thought of working with Flair again would always be a joy, but then I've got to be smart, and I got to think of what will work with Rick for the rest of his life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you read Rick's book?
Captures of it. I do have the book, and I've just read bits and pieces of it.
What is your take on what he has to say about your ex-wife Bonnie?
Well, you know, that's sort of
touchy.
It's you know, she was hard to deal with. You know, that's why we're exes. You know, and always like to be in the controlling factor. And in our business, you know, with the boys, the wives should stay out of the business. You know, but she wanted to be controlling and even trying to, you know, say and have an opinion on what was right and what was wrong for me to do. It's just many times always left me between a hard place and a rock. You know, with bookers and promoters and of course her at home. So. You know, it's. I mean, he was a little bit hard on it, but bottom line is that she was hard to deal with.
There's a quote in there that he says George Scott made that he said, "Get rid of her." That I know that she disputes. So, do you believe that George Scott would have said something like that? I know this is a tough one.
Yeah, George never came to me with it.
Right.
So that's the best that I can tell you on that. You know.
Okay, well, before we wrap up, would you mind if we do some word associations?
Okay.
We can give you a name, and if you have a story, you can feel free. If it's just one word, that's fine, too.
Okay.
All right, the first name I have on the list is Vern Gagne.
Really from old school. I guess I was fortunate to go through his camp and make it through his camp. At the time when I finished, he was requiring everybody that went through his camp to pay him 10% of what they earned throughout their wrestling career. I didn't like that. I didn't at the beginning. I thought that was the norm until finding out later that the boys were saying he's getting 10% of booking you, or calling it a booking fee. So when I got myself booked to come to Charlotte in 1977, I quit paying him. And he confronted me about that. I said, well, you didn't book me to Charlotte, so why should I pay you? And I don't know. I guess I do have some respect to him, to what he did for the business and what he did for his territory, but him just trying to get 10% out of guys, and he was, at that time, a multi-millionaire, and and a lot of time the guys weren't making all that type of big money, so to send him 10% was hard to bite on.
Don Morocco.
What a joy to work with. Yep, what a joy to another guy with him and Mr. Fuji in his corner, always coming up with great ideas and good psychology in the ring. Hard worker too. Don got up to where he was pretty big, 280, 300 pounds when we were working our program, but like I said, he was always there for my comebacks.
Right.
Yeah.
Harley Race.
Oh, God. A consummate worker. To be the world champion as he did and travel around to represent the NWA and to work with different guys almost every night, and to be able to do it for the length and period of time that he did it for, high praise with Harley, and I do keep in touch with him periodically.
How about the Junkyard Dog?
Another, I think JYD was limited to what he would do in the ring, but he would get the point across, and out of the ring he was always a prince of a guy too. Did great interviews, and did a JYD thing in the ring to a T. And I know for Bill Watts, he drew him a lot of money, made him a lot of money.
How about somebody we lost last year that I always say shocked me, and it still does, Miss Elizabeth?
I just knew her as a very quiet girl. And I just knew her during the time when she was married to Randy. Yeah, and it shocked me. I don't know much about Miss Elizabeth other than that period in time when Savage and I were working our deal back in 86, 87. So not much to say about her.
Jim Barnett.
Probably talked to Jim Barnett just a few times. Didn't know much of him or how much pull or power he had behind the scenes in the wrestling business, especially out of Atlanta, Georgia. So that's all I can say about that.
How about Hulk Hogan?
Well, there's a guy that got a big push at the right time. The Rocky movie came out and was very, very successful. Vince nabbed him from Vern.
Right.
And the guy could talk a good, could talk good on the mic. Was big in stature and was convincing, when the way he looked.
Right.
His work was okay. I think that if you've seen one of Hulk Hogan's matches, you've seen pretty much the same match night after night. On a 1 to 10, his work was probably about a 6. Yeah.
Okay, two left, and the second to last one is Ric Flair.
There's a guy that there was a guy that was very conscious about the business and very smart on how to make him look good and keep himself looking good. I'm not saying that as a downfall, but basically, if all of us guys would think as hard as he did on how to keep yourself on top.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was the name of the game.
Yeah.
Always treated me decent. Always had the best matches on the card whenever him and I were hooked up.
Right.
Hard worker and so forth and so on.
A little while ago, we were talking about guys that you said, like Muhammad Ali, that you thought should have stepped out. Would you put Flair in that boat, or do you think he's still as good as he ever was?
Well, no. I think he should have gotten out. I don't mind. You know, he loved the business so much, and everybody that knows Ric Flair's list, he knows that he just loves the business. And for him to make periodic calls to the ring, I don't see a problem with that. And everybody that has followed his career should understand how, you know, what, the guy's 54 years old now?
55, yes.
55 years old?
Yes.
And there's a 55-year-old man that can almost do all that he did when he was in his 20s,
right.
You know. But for him to be featured on a regular basis, you know, and I think right now that he's just being asked, you know, to call back in the ring on an occasion. Is that
right.
correct?
Yeah, he actually wrestled tonight, or last night anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like once every month or so.
Yeah.
Steps in there. And the final one I have for you is Vince McMahon.
Well, him and I do not see eye to eye on a lot of things. He was always trying to get me under contract, and I wouldn't sign. And it probably cost me a ton of money. The only drawback I saw in that was he wanted to have the controlling rights of Ricky Steamboat for perpetuity,
right.
which meant forever.
Right.
I always wanted to. I said I'd be open to sign any contract that you'd bring forth to me and have controlling rights over my name if we just put a timetable on the contract. You know, if you want to make it a duration of a 1-year deal or 3-year deal, or, you know, that I would be happy to do that. But for him to have controlling rights of the name forever, and if I left on bad terms, and then I couldn't take my name with me, you know,
right.
that's where I saw the downfall. But a guy with a big ego, and I guess you have to have it in some way, shape, or form, considering that the position that he's in our business. There's a lot of guys that don't like him. There's a lot of guys that are thankful to him. There's a lot of guys he made rich.
Right.
But, you know, the bottom line with Vince McMahon, it's either his way or no way.
Right.
And sometimes it's human nature just doesn't allow you to do that.
Absolutely. If he called you up and tried to invite you to the Hall of Fame, would you entertain his offer?
Let's go on record by saying I would entertain the offer, and I don't know right now if I would say yay or nay, but I would give it some serious thought.
Excellent. Well, we really can't thank you enough for your time. This has been far surpassed all of our expectation.
Okay, guys.
Go ahead, Daniel. Fire.
One final question I want to throw. Yeah. Because since you're working with the Ring of Honor now, I want to know your thoughts on their roster and who you think will be the next big name. If anyone from Ring of Honor, you know, that you've worked with is, you know, your pick for the top, who would it be?
Well, obviously it would. I'd have to go with CM. Right now they're in the process, or they're just starting the process of turning him into a babyface. And I'd like to see which direction they go with that. And also me coming aboard and using some of my suggestions and ideas on how to make it right for CM,
right,
and turning him from heel to babyface. You know, I think he could step up to the plate if he went to the WWE. I don't know if he would be up there with an Austin or, you know, like some of the big guys that they've put the company on. You know, like
right.
Hulk Hogan, the company was surrounded around him.
Right.
Austin, the company was surrounded around him. The Rock, the company was surrounded around him. I don't think CM is that capacity, but he sure would be a good main eventer, and he'd be a good hand to have on the card.
Right. Do you think Ring of Honor will ever be anything compared to the WWE, or do you think they'll be at that level? Just this level that they're in?
There will be. You know, people have asked me, says, "Do you ever think wrestling will ever come back to the way it was?" And I don't think wrestling will come back to the way it was. I think we'll have some groups out there like Ring of Honor that will be like a minor league,
Right.
like a minor league in baseball.
Right.
And then you have your choice guys that prove themselves minor league that make it to the majors.
Right.
And the majors being Vince.
Right.
So that's the direction to where I see, you know, 2 or 3 good companies with a good foundation, guys proving themselves, and then being picked up by the WWE, like the way, you know, a baseball player working in the minors for 2 or 3 years, and then he gets picked up by your major league team.
Right. Right.
No, I don't think anybody will ever be at the level that Vince is at, or be at the level that Vince was 10 years ago. You know, Vince is going to be Vince, and everybody else is going to be everybody else.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much for your time. I know this went longer than we expected, but we really can't thank you enough.
All right, guys.
All right, have a great day.
All right, you